Zending van de opening van de 29e Caribbean. Ik oefen. Ik oefen.
Oh, zo, oef.
Ik oefen.
Ik denk we zijn al begonnen.
29e Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee. We bevinden ons momenteel. Goedemorgen kijkers, mijn naam is Artie Latschman.
En ik ben Marlon Hoogdorp.
Ik heet u van harte welkom bij deze live-uitzending van de opening van de 29e Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee, CDCC. We bevinden ons momenteel in de bankethal van Hotel Torarica, waar zo aanstonds de meeting zal plaatsvinden. Toch meneer Hoogdorp?
Ja, inderdaad. De afgelopen 2 dagen zijn er aardig wat meetings hier geweest. Althans, 1 hele lange dag tot de middag, laat in de middag. En gisteren was een veel kortere sessie, waarbij dus landen heel wat zaken besproken hebben. En de bedoeling van deze 2 meetings waren eigenlijk de voorbereidende meetings op de grote meeting vandaag. In de meeting van vandaag zullen er heel belangrijke beslissingen genomen worden voor de Caribische regio. Om onze weerbaarheid, die zeg maar een beetje verzwakt is door allerlei wereld- of global omstandigheden. Zoals de
gevolgen van de
COVID-19.
COVID-19 die eigenlijk de landen hebben aangetroffen. Ze willen zich weerbaar gaan maken zoals u dat eerder heeft aangegeven. En andere onderwerpen zijn ook besproken. Als ik even mag kijken, schuldherschikking, economische integratie en de SDG's. Die zijn ook aan de orde gekomen. En belangrijk om u te vertellen is dat de delegatie bestaat uit ministers van Buitenlandse Zaken en Financiën uit de Caribische regio. En vandaag neemt dezelfde delegatie deel aan deze CDCC, waar aan het eind van de dag een highlight is natuurlijk.
Ja, een heel belangrijk moment voor Suriname. U weet dat Suriname intussen al een tijdje het voorzitterschap heeft van de CARICOM. Maar vandaag op ministerieel niveau zal onze minister van Buitenlandse Zaken en eigenlijk bijna, je kan zeggen bijna toevallig, ook minister van Financiën ad interim het voorzitterschap van de CDC zal overnemen. Dus dat is een belangrijk moment die u ook kan meemaken live. Althans, de overdracht misschien niet zozeer, want dit gedeelte is live, maar de meeting zelf niet. Maar in elk geval krijgt u daar verslag van via verschillende media. Maar Suriname neemt dus vandaag het voorzitterschap over van de CDCC. En dat is dus een heel belangrijk moment voor ons allemaal.
Natuurlijk, en zoals u weet is Suriname ook voorzitter van de CARICOM.
Yes.
En nu nemen we ook het voorzitterschap over van de CDCC. Heel belangrijk om te vertellen is dat we tussendoor ook live gaan komen met wat interviews. We gaan proberen om de delegatieleden een interviewtje met ze te hebben om te vragen hoe ze het hebben gevonden, wat hun visie is over bepaalde zaken, de onderwerpen die besproken zijn vandaag en hoe ze ernaar kijken als Caribische regio en hoe ze elkaar gaan ondersteunen. Want het gaat eigenlijk daarom dat ze elkaar samen willen ondersteunen om te komen tot een oplossing voor deze landen.
Zeker, de omstandigheden waaronder wij nu allemaal eigenlijk in de hele wereld leven. Zeker met on top of it all de COVID-pandemie die we voor een groot deel achter de rug hebben. Heeft een heel belangrijke bewustzijn gecreëerd. Maar zeker ook voor ons in het Caribisch gebied en wij als deel van de Caribbean community. Is om onze weerbaarheid te versterken. En dat kan je onder andere vooral door samen te werken, door intensiever samen te werken. Dus, en de meetings die er zijn geweest in de 2 voorbereidende dagen, zullen dus vandaag op basis daarvan zullen er besluiten genomen worden in deze belangrijke meeting met betrekking tot wat de Caribische regio allemaal zal moeten doen om hun weerbaarheid op basis van wat je net noemde, zoals de schuldenlast en allerhande zaken.
Ja, de gevolgen van COVID, de effecten die de landen hebben meegemaakt tijdens COVID-19 natuurlijk. Meneer Hoogdorp, u was ook aanwezig tijdens de roundtable de afgelopen 2 dagen. Hoe is het aan toegegaan eigenlijk? Wat gebeurt er precies om de mensen een indicatie
Ja, natuurlijk. Kijk, het is alvast heel druk bezet. Ik denk dat de meeste deelnemende of geregistreerde landen ook echt hebben deelgenomen. De zaal was helemaal vol. Maar het zijn echt heel, je kan zeggen, detailzaken die zijn besproken. Bijvoorbeeld, ik hoorde ze praten wel eens over hoe ga je zaken doen, hoe ga je bedrijven versterken, hoe ga je ervoor zorgen dat je onderling toch veel meer collaborations hebt op allerlei niveaus, waardoor je eigenlijk niet alleen staat, dat is ook erg belangrijk, maar ook hoe versterk je elkaar, hoe help je elkaar. Want natuurlijk, je begrijpt dat, ja, vaak denken we in termen van het Caribisch gebied, kleine landen, kleine eilanden en dat soort zaken, maar alles bij elkaar is toch een heel substantieel deel van de hele wereldbevolking. Dus er is wel een markt. Er zijn heel veel mensen die daarbij, en mensenlevens die daarbij betrokken zijn. Dus het is wel heel belangrijk dat het Caribisch gebied weet en systemen en strategieën bedenkt om te weten hoe ze met elkaar kunnen samenwerken, effectiever, maar hoe ze vooral elkaar kunnen versterken.
Ja, als de kijkers goed hebben gekeken, is minister Ramdin net hier gepasseerd. En wat ik hem kan vertellen is dat hij gisteren speciaal vanuit Washington DC is afgereisd naar Suriname voor deze belangrijke meeting. En waar hij straks later op de dag voorzitter zal worden van de CDCC. Dat is heel belangrijk om te weten. Hij is er al, hij is in de zaal. Hij is bezig kennis te maken met de mensen hier.
Dat wil zeggen dat we dan gelijk met de camera overgaan naar de zaal. En u zult ons nog een beetje horen. Dan wel met iemand anders, die ons een beetje zal vertellen over de deelnemers, vooral de buitenlandse deelnemers. En hopelijk geven we dan ook snel een overzichtje over de Surinaamse deelnemers. Wij gaan off-camera.
Ja, wat ik erbij kan vermelden is dat de delegatieleden zo zoetjes aan al plaatsnemen.
Ik kan misschien, minister, mag ik u heel even een minuutje, heel even snel. Ja toch, prachtig. We zijn live op dit moment. En voor Suriname is het natuurlijk een heel belangrijk moment. Zo straks neemt u het voorzitterschap over van de CDCC. Vanuit uw perceptie en uw verantwoordelijkheid, hoe belangrijk is dit voor Suriname?
Nou kijkt u, het is belangrijk voor Suriname, het is ook belangrijk voor de regio. CDCC is een platform waar langs belangrijke discussies, concrete discussies over de economie, over schuldenvraagstuk, over financiële economische zaken worden besproken. Intensief op technisch niveau worden besproken. Dat is de afgelopen 2 dagen gebeurd. En vandaag is het meer het politieke deel. Waarbij we formeel dan inderdaad voor de komende 2 jaar CDCC zullen overnemen. In dat verband zal er veel moeten gebeuren. Wat actiever. Omdat we in een periode leven in de wereld waar er zoveel gebeurt. De crisis wereldwijd. En ook de situatie in onze eigen regio. Vele landen met hoge schulden. We hebben ook natuurlijk de klimaatverandering. We hebben de COVID-19 impact nog steeds. Vele landen zijn nog niet erboven. Dus we hebben vele issues die we moeten bespreken. En er zijn verschillende momenten waarop dat kan gebeuren. We hebben afgelopen 3-4 weken gehad in de United Nations de algemene vergadering. We hebben daarna de OAS algemene vergadering gehad. Ik ben net terug van de Wereldbank IMF meetings en vandaag dus deze. Suriname geeft daar leiding aan, dus het is aan ons ook om nieuwe elementen toe te voegen. En ik denk dat het nodig is omdat we blijven steken in beloftes horen die niet waargemaakt worden. Dus het is tijd dat we een wat zwaarder standpunt innemen en niet onze stem continu blijven geven aan mooie doelen en aspiraties, maar dat er concreet iets gedaan wordt daarmee. Dit platform zal nuttig zijn. Het is een United Nations platform. Dus dat betekent dat we de aandacht van de wereld zullen hebben. Het valt samen voor een deel met het voorzitterschap van CARICOM. Dat geeft extra ruimte om wat meer beleidsmatig zaken toe te voegen. Dus ik hoop dat we in de komende 2 jaar in staat zijn een nieuwe visie te ontwikkelen. Over de wijze waarop het Caribisch gebied reageert op internationale ontwikkelingen. Maar tegelijkertijd ook initiatieven neemt zelf in de regio om een eigen ontwikkeling door te maken die duurzaam kan zijn. En waar we niet continu verrast worden door ontwikkelingen van buiten.
Vandaag is natuurlijk een highlight. Suriname neemt voorzitterschap over van CDCC. U wordt de voorzitter. Kunt u daarop ingaan? Wat betekent het voor Suriname?
Nou, voor Suriname betekent het dat ten eerste natuurlijk Suriname weer wordt uitgedragen. Want iedere keer als zo'n meeting plaatsvindt gaat men horen Suriname. Zodra men Suriname hoort, sommigen kennen Suriname heel goed. Anderen gaan dan een beetje meer lezen daarover. Dus er is een stukje promotie. Maar het geeft ons ook de gelegenheid om inhoudelijk een sterkere bijdrage te leveren. En inhoudelijk betekent in dit geval ook kijken naar wat zijn de prioriteiten voor ons als land. En welke bijdrage wij in de regio kunnen leveren. Zoals ik al eerder zei, de economie verandert in de wereld, de politiek verandert in de wereld. De toekomst van de wereld is vrij onzeker. We weten niet of we een wereldrecessie krijgen, een kleine of een grote. Maar al die dingen gaan besproken worden regelmatig, elke 3 maanden, virtueel meestal. En er zullen meetings zijn waar we dus in persoon aanwezig moeten zijn. Alleen maar mogelijkheden om Suriname weer uit te dragen. Maar ook de stempel van Suriname, de invloed die Suriname kan hebben op internationale en regionale processen, om die nadrukkelijk naar buiten te brengen.
Minister, we wensen u ontzettend veel succes toe. En bij voorbaat felicitaties met het voorzitterschap.
Ook aan Suriname natuurlijk, want ik ga dit doen namens Suriname. Ja, bedankt.
Succes en thank you very much. We gaan over naar de zaal totdat we dan overdragen aan de vergadering.
Ja, dat was minister Albert Rambin. Hij zelf heeft dan alles verteld over de vergadering die zo meteen plaatsvindt en wat er allemaal besproken zal worden. Hij is ook ingegaan op het voorzitterschap dat Suriname straks zal overnemen.
Nou, we zien u zo terug, maar voor nu even naar de zaal.
Distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin our formal proceedings. I invite you to stand for a very special rendition of the national anthem of the Republic of Suriname. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Yes, applause. Thank you very much. The Honorable Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business, and International Cooperation of the Republic of Suriname. The Honorable Kisal Melissa Peters, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Honorable Joseph Easton Farrell, Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Finance, Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Culture of Montserrat. The Honorable Dr. Ellis Webster, Premier of Anguilla. The Honorable G. Wayne Panton, Premier of the Cayman Islands. His Excellency, the Honorable Jeffrey Weaver, Minister of Economic Affairs, Telecommunications, and Sustainability of Aruba. His Excellency, the Honorable Ramon Cervantes, Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade, and Immigration, who I understand is celebrating a birthday today. His Excellency, the Honorable Leslie Campbell, Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica. His Excellency, the Honorable Alva Baptiste, Minister of External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation, and the Diaspora of St. Lucia. Mr. Benito Wheatley, Special Envoy of the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, distinguished representatives of government and international organizations attending both virtual and in person, Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, Mr. Rodolfo Sabonge, Deputy Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Joseph Cox, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished representatives of regional organizations and of colleague United Nations agencies, representatives of the media, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor for me to welcome you to this 29th session of the Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee, and to serve as Mistress of Ceremonies for this opening ceremony. With pleasure, I invite to the podium the shining new star in the constellation of foreign ministers of the Caribbean, the Honorable Kaysel Melissa Peters, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, outgoing chair of the CDCC. We were especially grateful for her brilliant leadership of the Caribbean Development Roundtable over the past 2 days on behalf of incoming chair, Minister Ramdin. Although we have only recently come to know and enjoy her spirit and tenacity, we intend to keep her close a little longer as an ex officio member of the Bureau of the CDCC as immediate outgoing chair. Minister Peters, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Mistress of Ceremonies. The Honorable Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation. Mrs. Diane Carlis, Director of the ECLAC Sub-Regional Headquarters for the Caribbean. The Honorable Joseph Easton Farrell, Premier and Minister for Foreign Affairs, Finance, Economic Development, Trade, Tourism and Culture of Montserrat. The Honorable Dr. Ellis Webster, Premier of Anguilla. The Honorable G. Wayne Panton, Premier of the Cayman Islands. Honorable Ministers from Aruba, Belize, Jamaica, St. Lucia, attending both virtual and in person. Mr. Benito Wheatley, Special Envoy of the Premier of the British Virgin Islands. Distinguished representatives of government and international organizations attending both virtually and in person, Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, Mr. Rodolfo Sobonye, Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, Dr. Armstrong Alexis, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Joseph Cox, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished representatives of regional organizations and the United Nations system, representatives of the media, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my pleasure to greet you as outgoing chair of the Caribbean Development Cooperation Committee. 2 years ago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines assumed the chair of the CDCC when the world was fully in the grips of the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing us to hold the CDR and CDCC virtually for the first time. For the first time, or the first time in a very long time, we were forced to share the priority attention usually given to long-standing development challenges in the Caribbean, such as high public debt, rising unemployment, and widening inequalities, with the more urgent and severe concerns regarding the health impacts of COVID-19 and their implications for social protection in our countries. And it didn't stop there. In fact, practically, the entire tenure of our chairmanship was marked by disaster. Last year alone, even as our sub-region struggled to cope with the devastating impact of the pandemic, which was itself a slow-moving disaster, the Caribbean experienced the full range of natural shocks, a devastating volcanic eruption in my own country that impacted neighboring islands as well, extreme flooding events in Guyana and here in Suriname, an earthquake in Haiti, tropical storms and hurricanes, too numerous to count. In recent weeks, Fiona and Ian have brought more misery to many of our Caribbean states. We in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are still struggling to restore normalcy to the rhythm of life and work at home, following the extreme dislocation brought by the eruption of La Soufrière in the midst of the pandemic. It is our repeated exposure to such extreme, recurrent, exogenous shocks that defines our multidimensional vulnerability. That underscores the structural and institutional fragility of our countries, demanding a comprehensive response. one that includes strengthened advocacy, solidarity, partnership, and international cooperation. We have, over the past 2 days, been exploring how to do exactly that. We have been considering how best to engage the empathy and support of the wider international community in our efforts to reset and reposition our economies on a path to sustainable growth and development. As outgoing chair of the CDCC, I welcome the opportunity to anchor the Caribbean Development Roundtable. It was a rich, substantive, inspiring dialogue on issues relevant, even vital, to our prospects of success in finding our way forward. We had a formidable gathering of leaders, thinkers, and regional and international representatives who wrestled with ideas on how we increase flows of innovative and concessional financing to relieve the burden of debt and liquidity constraints being experienced. How we infuse new dynamism to productivity and trade through diversification and economic restructuring, by investing in our people, by harnessing technology. I was very encouraged by the quality of our debate. There is no question that within our sub-region, we can find the solutions to the problems we face. Our challenge lies in finding the right strategic approach to secure the support of the donor community and international financial institutions. We in the Caribbean must continue to make the case for our sustainable development by repositioning the sub-region for recovery and resilience. I know we have all been making efforts to present our first voluntary national review, the VNR, on the progress in implementing the 2030 Agenda and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Some, like Jamaica, have presented twice. My own country was proud to present in 2020. Reporting through these VNRs is worth the effort because they show how far we have come in achieving the global goals in our respective countries and offers a glimpse of the common challenges that we face in implementing the SDGs. So I am looking forward to consideration of this item on our agenda today, and I thank ECLAC for the assistance that the Commission has given to member states and associate members in national sustainable development planning and in the preparation of VNRs. As the Caribbean prepares to host the 4th SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda in 2024, I also want to underscore the importance of the SIDS agenda as we get ready for the 10-year review of the SIDS Accelerated Modalities of Action, the Samoa Pathway. Now more than ever, our sub-region needs to give the Samoa Pathway the attention it deserves. For this is the development platform that best takes into account the unique vulnerabilities of small island developing states. We need to own it. I am therefore also looking forward to this discussion today. Distinguished representatives, as St. Vincent and the Grenadines prepares to relinquish leadership of this committee, I want to thank ECLAC for its continuing support to our sub-region, championing the cause of our development, and strengthening our advocacy in the international community by providing us with the research and data that makes our story more compelling. I look forward to hearing what perspectives for the future the most recent research in their Caribbean outlook will present in support of our efforts for recovery and resilience in the sub-region. As we now hand over to Suriname, I want to assure you all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines' unswerving commitment to the development of the Caribbean and our readiness to offer every support to the incoming chair as he prepares to take on the daunting role of leading us all towards a brighter tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Peters, for that most valuable contribution. The CDCC is privileged to have in its incoming chair the Honorable Albert Ramden, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business, and International Cooperation of Suriname, a seasoned and astute politician and practitioner in the international arena. His tenure as Deputy Secretary General of the Organization of American States imbued him with an intimate knowledge and understanding of the development challenges of the entire Latin America and the Caribbean. Further, his previous work as director of an international development cooperation agency here in Suriname and as senior advisor in the Ministry of Trade and Industry makes him eminently suited to lead this committee during these particularly challenging times. We at ECLAC are especially happy to welcome him to the helm. Minister Ramdin, you have the floor.
Good morning, all. The Honorable Kisal Melissa Peters, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, my neighbor at international meetings all the time. Thank you very much for being here. Honorable Premiers and Special Envoys of different member countries of the Caribbean, Honorable Ministers from Aruba, Belize, Jamaica, St. Lucia, attending both virtual and in person. Director of ECLAC Sub-Regional Headquarters for the Caribbean, distinguished representatives of government and international organizations, attending both virtual and in person, Secretary General of the ACS, Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, CARICOM Assistant Secretary General, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished representatives of regional and international organizations, including the United Nations system, representatives of the media, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome. On behalf of the government and people of Suriname, it's now my turn to welcome you in Paramaribo. I know that most of you have been here for 2 or even 3 days, and I'm confident that our teams have been taking good care of you all and that you have enjoyed Surinamese hospitality in all of its aspects. I would like to thank especially the Honorable Minister Kisal Peters of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for her sterling contribution as outgoing chair, but also taking care of meetings here while I could not attend. But the leadership of St. Vincent and the Grenadines of the CDCC the past 2 years, turbulent times in many ways, and particularly presiding over the 7th CDR, is to be recognized and important in the context of creating unity and a shared vision for this community. We hope and we commit to build our work done by St. Vincent and the Grenadines during their tenure, especially for Suriname being in a unique position as a leading voice of the Caribbean regional, as chair of the Caribbean community, and as today taking over the chairmanship of CDCC. And I'm very pleased, although it's still a virtual meeting as well, but Ms. Qualls, I hope that we can move to a situation where these meetings where we need to see each other, talk to each other, relate to each other, and exchange views beyond the formal settings, that in the future we can continue with CDCC to be held as a full in-person meeting. And of course, there will be other opportunities to discuss matters virtually, but I think when we speak about these meetings, these high-level representatives, it's good to have everybody in the room because that adds to the strength of the conference and of the discussions which we will have. As Minister Matura, the Minister of Defense, but also Acting Minister of Foreign Affairs, would have informed you during the opening of the CDR, I attended the annual IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C. over the past few days, where we discussed very challenging financial circumstances, not only for the developing countries, but certainly for the developed world as well. And I'll come back to this later on. But the vulnerability that this creates, I should say, the additional vulnerability this creates for the already vulnerable countries in the Caribbean, small island economies, and countries with low-lying coastal areas is, of course, something which will draw our attention. And I think maybe in one of our first meetings, virtual, we must review the outcome of the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank in the context of new elements which have been being proposed and new instruments which are being proposed. So I think that will give us an opportunity to evaluate where the Caribbean stands in terms of its opportunities to resolve some of the pressing issues which we have in our economies. Madam Chair, I have been briefed by the team on the constructive discussions that have taken place over the past 2 days during the CDR meeting, where similarly there was a focus on the challenges of debt, liquidity, and vulnerability in our own region, all of which pose a threat to the development of our countries. This is nothing new. The only difference is it has deepened and even broadened, and we must take a serious look at it. I understand that the Roundtable also received comprehensive updates on the progress made towards the approval of a multidimensional vulnerability index, a matter which has been raised on all occasions in the past weeks, at the United Nations General Assembly by many leaders, at the OAS General Assembly in Peru a couple of days ago, where Minister Peters, Minister of St. Lucia and Jamaica were present as well, where the point has been made that without such an index, there is an unjust, unfair, untenable mechanism in place to deal with the issues Caribbean countries and other member states of ECLAC are facing. I'm happy also to see that the whole issue of the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index has the support of Secretary General Guterres. So fundamentally, it's also a mandate for ECLAC to deepen or to strengthen its work with regard to the index, also to advocate more strongly, not just by words, but just putting specifics in place so that we can at least come close to a decision-making with regard to the MVI. I want to add my thanks and congratulations to the participants in the panel for the substantive and thought-provoking contributions. And I think it's time for that. We have been speaking too long, and I think it's time to act, to do things, and to make things happen. So let us move from words to action as we prepare for recovery, repositioning, and resilience, but also for sustained economic development. I strongly believe, and this is based on just 4 meetings which we attended over the past couple of weeks, that from all discussions which we have been part of, that we have to transform in a different mode of action. We have to be more bold, more clear, we have to be more united, and we have to be more forceful in expressing our positions, our needs, our opinions, and ultimately also the solutions which we present. At this point, it remains words. I don't see the translation into action. And I think it's time that we change that paradigm to action. That means we will have to be bold. I thought somebody didn't like the word bold maybe, but okay. It's clear to me that we live in turbulent times. We live in uncertain times. Nobody knows where the world is going, whether we will have a light recession or a heavy recession, where the pain will be, nobody knows. not even those who think they know, not even those who are creating the turbulent times. So this is something of concern all. We must all be very much aware that we do not know what the future holds. That's the first point. The second point I must make is that this global crisis adds to the vulnerability of many countries, not only the developing countries, not only the Caribbean region, not only the small island states, but many other countries, even in the developed world. So vulnerability should be of concern to all as well. And then the third point, which I think sometimes out of convenience we tend to forget that, or certain countries tend to forget that, is that we live in an interdependent world. We live in a globalized environment. What happens in one part of the world will have an impact on other parts of the world and the developments. In that interdependency, we have to see a driving force for a united approach, for getting all countries on board. These three elements should not be forgotten: uncertainty, vulnerability, and interdependence. If we accept those, then we know that there is a shared responsibility for one, but also for all. And it doesn't matter. And I must say here, there are two crises over the past couple of years, shortly after each other. One is not even over as yet, COVID-19 and the conflict, the war in Ukraine. In both cases, and this is a question to be posed to the United Nations, as well as to other international and regional organizations, is the issue about the quality, the strength of the international system. In both cases, and we can debate if that's true or not, but in my view, it's true, the international system failed badly, tremendously. In the case of COVID-19, solidarity did not mean anything anymore. All those lofty conventions and resolutions to help each other did not mean anything. Maybe for understandable reason, but it failed. And everybody recognizes that. But what do we do about it? In the case of Ukraine, international law failed. The principles of international law were put aside. And up to today, no country, except for sanctions and some diplomatic efforts, can intervene in that process. So this is uncertainty, unpredictability. So we have to take care of these things. And we have made a point at the United Nations that it's time. It's not only about the reform of the United Nations Security Council. I think for the Caribbean, we can be an honest broker, presenter of new ideas on how to create a more just and fair global system. And we have to have the courage to do that so that we make sure that in the end, unjust behavior is punished and not accepted. Up to today, that's not the case. And that is something which we need to realize very strongly. And if we look at what is happening in the world now in this uncertainty, what is the impact on our countries, on all countries in the world? Increased inflation, increased supply chain cost, possibly scarcity of certain foodstuffs. Food, fuel prices go up in every single country. As a consequence of this uncertainty and the economic impact, we see divisions arise. Again, countries come together and take care of themselves. Major exemptions are being granted in terms of gas and fuel to certain countries because of convenience and self-interest. But in our own region, we see that that's not granted, so that this region could take care of its own energy supplies because there are sanctions to certain countries. We have to be cognizant of the fact that we need a more just system, a more equal system, where there are no exceptions made for the one and then denied to others. I think we have to be bold, because there are two other opportunities still this year, maybe three. We have the COP27 in Egypt. We have the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. And then we'll have the OECPS summit in Africa, in Angola. These are opportunities for CARICOM leaders to express their voice, not only in terms, and it's not a complaint, it shouldn't be a complaint, but it should be a vision, a position, how we can help restore some sort of order, predictable order in the world. And I think that's the call I would like to make. Otherwise, the consequence of that is very domestic. All politics is local, as we say. The social cost of all these impacts is going to be high. As a consequence, the social spending will increase. And as a consequence, because most of these countries do not have the resources, if the social cost is high, what is the next cost? The political cost. And the political cost, when that becomes eroded or under pressure, it affects democracy, human rights, rule of law, and good governance. So in the end, it's about our own society. This is where you see interdependency work in a very practical way. What happens in Ukraine could have impact on democracy in our own region. And if we do not realize this, but also respond to it, we'll get ourselves into trouble. I have a lot of things, and the team has drafted some very good text, and I will distribute that. I don't want to take up too much time of this discussion, but I want to address one other point where we have to be practical, and that's on climate change. COVID-19 is not gone. We have learned to live with it, and we tend to forget how it was less than a year ago in many countries with masks and certain rules and regulations. But we have now almost forgotten that. That's something which we have to be cognizant also about, that pandemics, medical crisis can just turn up. We don't control that. But COVID-19's impact is not over. Many of our economies have not been able to reboot up to the same level as we had projected or had hoped for. So, that being the case, the older crisis of climate change, the climate crisis, is still there, and it has an impact. I won't go into the cost it brings to societies, like Suriname, Guyana, and other parts. We see the differentiation as well. Within close distance, we see drought as a major climate impact. But at the same time, just a couple of 100 kilometers further down, you have floods. Those seem to be opposing phenomena, but it has a real impact on our countries and the cost. So apart from increased social spending, you have increased cost on livelihood. Taking this to climate change, we have been speaking for many, and this region particularly, for many, many decades about climate change and all the measures that need to be taken. What I think it's important to realize now and to learn that lesson is that promises made on lofty ideals, on very noble aspirations, will not get us anywhere if there is no financing attached to it. And that's where the system has failed as well. Since the Paris Accord was signed, promises have been made, up to $1 billion, but a very little part has been delivered. So as a consequence, we have not benefited from the set promises. On top of the fact that we are not the major or the most serious countries, the countries that have not contributed to carbon emissions, is those countries that are emitting carbon are not willing to put up the funds to recover. And again, we're going to go shortly to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, early November. And again, we'll sign on to lofty ideals and noble objectives. And again, we'll provide consensus to a process which does not translate in real funds to recover some of the impact of climate change. So it's time that we change that paradigm as well, with a clear message as we prepare for for COP27. We have to make sure that the region gets its fair share of the funds available. That's the first point. We need a strong allocation mechanism with regard to resources to come to the region. At this point, the Global Climate Fund, the environmental funds have disbursed very little to this region. The other thing is the disbursements, the appraisal procedures, the application procedures seem to be a science on its own, so complicated. So we need to simplify those as well. And I think we have a moral obligation to make these points, but also to demand those. So going to Egypt just to add our voice to these lofty ideals is going to be a lost cause because we're not going to benefit from it. We must come up with certain mechanisms, financial instruments specifically dedicated to this region. And I must say that once, this has been the experience, once funds has been dispersed to this region, a large part of that goes to consultancies and studies. We do not need that. By now we know what climate change is and means to us because we live it. So I don't need a study to tell me how a flood works. What I need to know is how much money do I have to recover? Livelihood, employment, production. And that's exactly what is not happening. So our coastal erosion doesn't need to be explained on how the erosion took place because we know that. Hundreds of kilometers have been eroded. What we need is funds, projects, which will deliver physical, tangible contributions to restore mangrove in our coastal area. That's the kind of approach, a more practical, sincere, honest approach to making our world in this region better. So as you see, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot on our agenda. ECLAC can play a significant role in this process of rethinking our future in the context of the global uncertainty. ECLAC can assist, and I'm happy that we are committed to do that through studies, analysis, but also with concrete proposals such I just suggested. We need to bring this as a unified position of the Caribbean that's on the MVI, on instruments for specifically financial instruments for the region, the issues on climate change. We need to bring this to these countries, to these conferences as a united position. Only then, I think, a little bit of attention and real money will flow to this region. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that inspired and visionary sharing of ideas. Already I see that we will have our work cut out for us supporting you as our new chair. We are going to now enjoy a cultural performance. Are they ready? It is a group from the School of Young Talent. It's a regular elementary school where children are given the opportunity to develop their talent. And today they will present a potpourri of native Javanese and Chinese songs, as well as songs in Sranang-Tongo. Did I say that right? The lingua franca of Suriname, beginning with an indigenous prayer involving Tamushi, asking for strength and wisdom, which is also danced. Wow. The youth presentation ends with a multicultural dance. I think we're in for a treat.
Toke toke chinahing, roda tek na shinahing. Toke toke chilaling, orin swatek sing. Licha licha lumpia, lumpia fong Of the bril das not done
No, you can give them a better round of applause than that. This was spectacular and unexpected, I have to say. I want to thank Chief of Protocol and for her organization of this wonderful feast of culture. We enjoyed it. As we are sort of at a pause, we have decided to, this is the, no, we still have the video message of the, I think we should have that first, eh? I think we need to have the video message from the executive secretary, and then we will break. And we're going to have an abbreviated coffee break, and then we will come back and go straight through. But let us just first, to close on all the statements for the morning, received the video message from Jose Manuel Salazar Sirinac, who is the new executive secretary of ECLAC. He took the job only last week. His first day was last week, Monday. And he will be in Argentina this week preparing for the session, which is the 24th to the 26th. And so he is not able to be with us. He has asked me to express his apologies and to encourage you all to be in Argentina for the session in 2 weeks' time. So let us receive his video message, and then we will break and come back to begin the official proceedings.
The Honorable Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation of Suriname, and other distinguished members of government of the Republic of Suriname, Chair of the CDCC. The Honorable Keisal Peters, Foreign Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, outgoing Chair of the CDCC, Premiers, Ministers, and senior representatives of government, members of the Diplomatic Corps, His Excellency Rodolfo Sabonge, Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, His Excellency Armstrong Alexis, Deputy Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, representatives of the United Nations System and other regional organizations, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to greet you on the occasion of the 29th session of the Caribbean Development and Cooperation Committee. Indeed, your meeting serves as the inaugural event of my tenure as Executive Secretary of ECLAC. As you know, I am honored to have assumed this position in early October. Unfortunately, I was not able to join you in Suriname and truly regret missing this opportunity to meet you. But I look forward to welcoming many of you to our intergovernmental meeting in Argentina later this month, and certainly I look forward to working with you over the coming months and years. Allow me to congratulate Minister Ramdin on his assumption to the chair of the CDCC and to thank St. Vincent and the Grenadines through Minister Peters for their leadership of the committee over the past 2 years. Permit me also to acknowledge the Honorable Easton Farrell, Premier of Montserrat and the current chair of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, who will give voice to issues of interest for the associate members of the CDCC during this meeting. I want to assure Premier Farrell of the Commission's continued embrace and support of all associates members and encourage your fullest participation in our work. As a native of Costa Rica, I count myself as a member of the wider Caribbean family. And during my career, I have worked extensively throughout the region. So I am very familiar with the development challenges faced by our small states. I offer you the continuing support of ECLAC under my leadership as we pursue solutions to the many issues that confront you, in line with our Caribbean First strategy. We will work to raise the global understanding and appreciation of the challenges that make the countries of this sub-region uniquely vulnerable, despite their middle-income status. COVID-19 heightened the multidimensional vulnerability of our countries, widening inequality, weakening social protection systems, elevating already high debt service costs, rising poverty, inequality, and unemployment levels, particularly among women and youth. Combined, these factors heighten the sub-region's vulnerability to climate change and disasters. This, of course, is an issue of real concern for the Caribbean, for yours is one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world. This persistent high exposure to natural hazards has not only contributed to the destruction of productive assets, but it has also exacerbated public debt and fiscal challenges as your governments diverted resources earmarked for investment in growth and development to recovery and reconstruction post-disaster. Now, the combined impacts of the war in Ukraine, rising inflation, and COVID-19 have added to the economic, social, and environmental fragility of this sub-region. This strengthens the case for a multidimensional vulnerability index to effectively calibrate the deservedness of your countries for concessional support from the international community. This is one of the issues being considered by your meeting this week, as is the prospects for enhancing global and regional partnerships to support recovery and repositioning of your economies to strengthen resilience. So the solidarity and renewed partnerships with the global community is essential. During my tenure, the Commission will endeavor to remain a forum that fosters and supports such engagement to voice the concerns of Caribbean small island developing states with regional and international partners. For this reason, I am pleased to see active participation in the Development Roundtable this week of partners, including colleagues of UN agencies, CARICOM, and the Association of Caribbean States. I am also advocating for the establishment of a Caribbean Resilience Fund and other innovative financing solutions which could leverage long-term affordable development financing for the Caribbean, while ensuring the availability of resources for investment in resilience, diversification, and structural transformation, and creating new avenues for employment and enhancing competitiveness. The Caribbean Resilience Fund will help to address the limited access to concessional financing for investment in resilient and inclusive growth. I trust that you will support the next steps towards making this fund a reality. Another critical issue addressed in your meetings this week is the ongoing effort to strengthen data and statistical capacity in the Caribbean. The importance of this effort cannot be overstated. Data provides the anchor and direction for sound planning and strategic decision-making, and are the most persuasive results for effective advocacy. The Commission is resolute in its commitment to support your countries in building data platforms and strengthening national statistical capacity. We look forward to working in partnership with CARICOM and other regional organizations. How then do we set a course and chart our path forward together? Your discussions during the Development Roundtable should set the right tone and direction for your deliberation today. You will preview ECLA's Caribbean Outlook for 2022, a report that will situate your sub-region on a trajectory towards recovery post-pandemic and will suggest critical areas for investment and remedial action. I encourage you to take full advantage of this opportunity for exchange of views and sharing of ideas so that the decisions you reach will serve to guide us in the shaping of a program of work that responds appropriately to the needs of your sub-region. Once again, I pledge to you the support of my team, in particular our sub-regional headquarters for the Caribbean in Porto, Spain. I look forward to meeting you personally in Argentina, so to begin a new chapter of cooperation and partnership with ECLAC under my leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will break for coffee now. It will not be a half hour. It will be a 15-minute break so that we can try to recover some time. And when we return, we will start with the election of officers and effect the transfer of the chair. We also have the official photograph. So I invite you now to have a cup of coffee and to meet us outside on the grass as we did 2 days ago for the official photograph, 15 minutes. So we will be back here in 15 minutes time. That's when. You got it. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to very briefly have a photo so that the press can share in the event. I will indicate two of my colleagues at the back, Astra and Pamela. Please follow them and they will direct you where we're going to go for the official photo. Hopefully we can do it in 5 minutes.
Ja, wij gaan afsluiten voor de live. Oké, zijn we afgeschreven? Jij checkt toch?
Oké, gaat u.
Okay. Yes, intussen is het een hele bedrijvigheid hier in deze belangrijke meeting voor Suriname en voor het Caribische en Latijns-Amerikaanse regio. Zoals u gemerkt heeft in de uitzending en in deze vergadering, zullen er dus vandaag na de verkiezing van Suriname als voorzitter van de CDCC, zullen er op basis van de meetings die gehouden zijn de afgelopen 2 dagen, dat waren dus de voorbereidende meetings, zullen dus belangrijke besluiten genomen worden die de Caribische regio en Latijns-Amerika in samenwerking met allerlei andere organisaties die hiermee te maken hebben, waaronder de United Nations. Want dit is dus een United Nations platform, zoals eerder is verteld door de minister. Zullen er dus belangrijke besluiten genomen worden om ons als regio zeg maar beter weerbaar te maken, beter te beschermen, toch?
Ja, klopt helemaal. We hebben ook de outgoing chair gehoord. Ze heeft ook een speech gehouden vandaag. En natuurlijk ook de incoming chair, dat is minister Albert Ramdien. Hij heeft ook zijn speech gegeven daarnet. Ja. En nu is er een fotomoment, dat kunnen we u vertellen. En daarna is er een koffiebreak en de dag gaat dan verder.
Ja, het belangrijkste natuurlijk waarover we het ook gehad hebben, ook met de minister Albert Ramdien, die het voorzitterschap zo meteen overneemt, zal dus het voorzitterschap zijn. Dat zullen dus, ik denk, commissieleden gekozen worden, aangewezen worden. En dan zal wat je noemt de verkiezing plaatsvinden. Het moet dus officieel en dan wordt Suriname als voorzitter gekozen. In dit geval vanwege ook onze CARICOM voorzitterschap wordt Suriname dan gekozen als voorzitter van de CDCC. En onder dit voorzitterschap, dat is dus van minister Albert Ramdien, zal hij die meeting dan verder leiden. En zullen dan ook de zaken die besproken zijn in de vorige meetings, de 2 voorbereidende meetings, zullen op basis daarvan besluiten genomen worden.
Ja, dit is nog steeds de Caribbean Development Cooperation Committee, CDCC, waarnaar u live kijkt. Maar zometeen gaan we dan afscheid moeten nemen van de kijkers.
Inderdaad, wij staan natuurlijk, voordat je afkondigt.
Ja,
dat is dus
willen we enkele mensen bedanken. We willen natuurlijk bedanken team CDS, de communicatiedienst Suriname. Willen we bedanken voor hun hulp tijdens deze live uitzending. Ook in samenwerking met ATV Networks. En onder leiding van regisseur Rivalino Chuntaksen. Heel hartelijk dank voor jullie medewerking, guys. En ja, meneer Hoogdorp.
Ja, ik moet zeggen dat het een feilloze live-uitzending is geweest, voor zover ik het zelf heb kunnen bekijken. En hier en daar natuurlijk wat feedback, technische feedback. En ik moet zeggen, heel hartelijk bedankt. Ook het team van CDS doet hier een fantastische job in de verslaggeving, het vastleggen, het creëren van, produceren van persberichten, zodat de samenleving constant en regelmatig op de hoogte is van wat er zich allemaal hier afspeelt. De komende dagen zullen wij, omdat we dus nog heel wat interviews hebben, zullen wij dus u nog op de hoogte houden van inzichten met betrekking tot deze belangrijke gebeurtenis voor Suriname, het Caribisch gebied en Latijns-Amerika.
Ja, natuurlijk willen wij u als kijkers bedanken voor het willen kijken naar deze live-uitzending. Heeft u het gemist, kunt u nog altijd op onze Facebookpagina van de Communicatiedienst Suriname en onze social media kanalen kunt u terug om te kijken naar deze uitzendingen.
Heel hartelijk bedankt en ik zou zeggen heel fijne dag voor u. Ik ben Marlon Hoogdorp.
Mijn naam is Artie Latschman. Tot de volgende keer. Goeiedag.